You're watching Capitol Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. Our Reporters Roundtable is with us. Amanda Vinicky from WTTW and Jerry Nowicki, the Capitol Bureau Chief with Capitol News Illinois. You've seen some of their reporting on TV in the Chicago area and in newspapers across Illinois. Good to have you both with us.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
Amanda, what do you make of this election year politics and what you've seen so far from the budget push, the reaction to crime? How do you analyze what you saw this week?
I mean, what is happening, has happened in the Capitol for this last week of session is all about the election. I mean, there's the regular stuff that has to get done. Of course, you have to pass a budget, but by the way, it doesn't have to be done this early. That's because of the election. The whole timeline has shifted in order for lawmakers to hit the campaign trail. The budget, yes, it is an election year budget. There's no other way to look at it but that. All of this tax relief that voters are going to be getting, not quite sure how much they'll actually notice it, a 1% cut in the grocery sales tax. Are you going to notice a penny on a dollar purchase, $1 on a $100 purchase? Probably not. But are you going to notice it when you get campaign literature that says property tax relief, grocery store cuts? Yes. Are people going to say, oh wow, legislators are sending me, or it's our own taxpayer money, check in the mail essentially for $100 right around election time? Yes, so much of the Capitol right now is oriented toward the coming primary election, and then also, again, a lot of this relief is linked to timing of the general election in November. Politicians love buzzwords. They love selling good, warm, fuzzy ideas. And some of those longer issues that plague the state in the long term, those aren't as sexy. They don't sell as well in that campaign mailer that you were suggesting. But tackling unfunded pension relief? What? That's not a headline grabber?
It's a head scratcher, more right. But Jerry, there are some of those issues. The Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund was one of them. The pandemic sending 1 million people to the unemployment line, some of that fraud exacerbating that $4.5 billion deficit, and they didn't really close that gap.
Right. There's still a $1.8 billion deficit there, and there's really no solution yet at this point, but some of the more crippling tax increase on businesses and reductions to the types of unemployment benefits that people can claim, those aren't going to happen in July as they were scheduled to. They've been pushed back to January in the agreement, and maybe it continues to be negotiated as a broader effort to pay down the $1.8 billion in the veto session, but we're just going to have to watch.
May 31st at midnight used to be a real deadline when lawmakers had to get that simple majority. At 12:01, they would say, well, you got to go over, you got to get the supermajority now to pass something through. April 8th just doesn't have that same pressure, that same feeling. Did that change the dynamics at all, you think, and how these negotiations happened this week?
You know, I don't know if it changed. It certainly changes the urgency on a day like April 8th. I think there's a little more laxity because they know if they have to, they can go beyond. But I think what really...
If they accidentally zero out some important line in the budget, they can come back and fix it later.
Right. And I think what really sort of made this process easier in terms of budgeting is just that state revenues have been far better than expected, and it's just some sort of weird reaction to the pandemic to some extent, because states can tax the extra unemployment benefits that people were getting for a long time, and also people, rather than going out and spending their money on services that aren't taxed, they were staying home and they were buying from Amazon, which is taxed, and or on other online retailers. So it was just the changes in consumer spending really propagated the added revenue that made a budget like this possible.
That's the budget side. Amanda, every political ad we've seen so far has mentioned crime, almost every one of them. And it was an interesting thing to observe as Republicans stood to the floor and said, this is empty, this bill you're trying to do just grabs a headline, and then as soon as they put down their mic, they all voted for it.
Right, and I think that you have here an interesting dynamic at play because Democrats are looking to essentially thread the needle, being able to follow through on promises that we heard, frankly, at the very start of the year from the legislative leaders, Democrats recognizing that crime was going to be an issue, again, in the coming election and in their districts. They're hearing about it from their constituents. So they're going to tackle it, but of course not wanting to go too far and really upset the more progressive wing of the party, those who believe in less funding for law enforcement, and particularly the Black Caucus, and at the same time wanting to, like I said, do something. So Democrats are looking to thread the needle, and then Republicans calling for action on crime, but also because of the election, wanting almost there to be not enough done so that they continue to campaign that Democrats are at fault for the surges in violence.
There are some Republicans who want to say they broke it, they the Democrats, so they should
let us
own
fix it.
Right, well, yeah, elect us and we'll fix it, right, that's been the message. All right, as we shift our gaze from the State House to the campaign trail in the coming weeks, lawmakers leave this building and go out and try to win your vote. What are some races or some themes that you're watching that will be of interest to you?
So, I mean, it is, again, connected with what is happening under the Capitol dome, and the big things are going to be crime. I think first and foremost, that is up there, and inflation, the economy. That is where this budget is designed and is, I think, going to be sold as one that is meant to help people out at a time that they are hurting. You're going to see that most at play in the governor's race, of course, Secretary of State's race, wide open, super interesting, but a lot of mudslinging is going to be in that race as well.
Jerry, any themes or races you're watching?
I think the most interesting thing to watch is the top of the GOP ticket, because the Darren Bailey-led ticket is a lot different than Richard Irvin or even Paul Schimpf or whoever. So, I mean, how this day and age, how broadly does the top of the ticket really affect it? I don't know, but the Democrats really seem to believe that they have an easier path against someone like Bailey than someone like Irvin.
I think you're right. Republicans have really trained a lot of their focus and attack on Governor Pritzker these last few weeks, and once they get out of this building, they're going to have to figure out, okay, who's backing who. That inter-party fight is probably going to burst out into the open in just a matter of seconds here.
Yeah, that's true. No, I think, Mark, you're right. And what we don't quite know, I mean, to me, again, the timeline has shifted, so it's a whole different sort of election. You can't forget when we look at legislative races, of course, that this is under a new map. What is that going to mean? And then also, I think when you look at the Republicans, the Trump factor is still a question. What sort of crossover is there going to be? Particularly, you look downstate, I think has been written off as is read. It is going to be how many people in the suburbs that might have a tinge of a color like I'm wearing, are going to pull GOP ballots in the primary, and what sort of impact is that going to have on who advances to the general? We
look forward to more of your reporting in those weeks and months to come. June 28th, that primary that people are looking forward to, and from there on to the general election. Amanda and Jerry, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to be here with you.
We're back in just a moment.